You just want to fire away?
Hey, Josh, are you starting to get a better feel for how revenue sharing and NIL is going to impact competitiveness, specifically in the football program?
We're continuing to work through that. Clearly, that it is the question that everybody wants answers to, and including us. And as we talked about a few weeks back, trying to identify the triangulation of sports sponsorship, scholarships, and roster limits is a big part of that. And then that feeds into what you're going to have for revenue sharing, and then how that money will be distributed. And at the same time, you have to build a platform to help your student athletes create real NIL opportunities. And so there's multifaceted. It's a multifaceted building that we're constructing right now, and there's just still a lot of questions that we need to get answers to.
Josh's program has gotten more competitive over the last 3 years. What's important for them, and how important is it for that program to elevate to that next step?
I think everybody understands the importance of football to a Big Ten athletics program, and the University of Illinois is no different. And so we've been in a lot of one-score games here these last couple of years. We've played really competitive football, which has been an important, necessary step for us. Now we need to start winning some more of those games, and I have just tremendous confidence in the staff and Coach Bielema, our players, that we're really well positioned to take that next step as we head into this new season.
You think it's gotten harder because of changes in college sports for in Illinois in football in particular to catch certain programs, overtake others? You know, has the challenge gotten bigger?
No, I don't think it's gotten harder. I think being a Big Ten football team's been really hard for a really long time, and so I think there are new opportunities available to programs across the spectrum, and I think part of our strategy at a place like Illinois has been to try and capitalize on the change, on the disruption that's happening in our industry, to put our program in a stronger position than where we have been historically. And so, if anything, I think that these changes around the industry of college athletics give us an opportunity at a place like Illinois to improve our positioning rather than the inverse of that.
I don't know if you consider it a trade secret, but what ways have you tried to maybe take advantage of the changes in the last couple of years?
I don't think it is a secret. I think we've leaned in on name, image, likeness in a way that I think places maybe were reluctant to do, especially at the beginning. We have been more aggressive in the transfer environment. As said with this group previously, I think Illinois has been and will continue to be a beneficiary of the transfer portal. Now we're trying to position ourselves in, whether it's the Illini Era project, which we've announced recently, or some of the modernization steps that we've taken around our revenue generation and economic engine to try and improve our fan experience and look for ways to monetize our events in a way that allows us to fund the program at a necessary level.
With USC and UCLA coming in, Washington, Oregon, we've always seen these TV deals that are increasing. How is that going to impact the finances of Illinois football, maybe other athletic programs within the program?
Big Ten's fortunate. We're the most prestigious conference in the country. We have access to tremendous television partners, and it puts our members in a position to benefit from that financially. And so when we have the chance to bring on brands like USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, of course it enhances the overall value of the Big Ten Conference, and by extension the distributions that the members are able to enjoy. And so we're fortunate to be in the conference we are. We look forward to continuing to keep the Big Ten strong at the forefront of college athletics. I have tremendous confidence in Tony Petitti and the leadership that he's brought to the Big Ten for the last year and a half, and think we're really well positioned to meet these new opportunities that the future presents head on.
Is it exciting to have games in the Coliseum, have games in the Rose Bowl in the future?
Absolutely. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be excited about the chance to go and play in some of those venues, some of the most historic venues in college football. We're really proud to have one of those venues on our campus at the University of Illinois. I think everybody realizes we're going to celebrate the 100th anniversary of that dedication and the Red Grange performance this year against Michigan. And so it just adds to the brand of Big Ten football, and to be able to go into even more of these historic stadiums and give our student athletes that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to compete in some of those buildings.
Is there more you think you can do as an athletic department to support football to keep pushing it maybe towards the top of the conference?
We're always looking for things that we can do to support our football program. We've worked to try and identify what those areas may be over the years. It's an ongoing evaluation. There's a conversation that happens with Coach and myself almost on a daily basis about places where we can continue to grow and advance. And so we're certainly never going to be satisfied with where we are, and we have a responsibility as the administration of this program and ultimately at the university to make sure we're doing everything we can to put the football program in a position to be successful.
Just there was a lot of talk last week in Dallas about the House settlement money. 75% or 80 of them would go to football players. Is that an accurate interpretation of how you think this would work in this league as well, and how it would work in the University of Illinois?
I think that the Title IX question is one that continues to drive a lot of interest. I understand that. We don't have great answers on that yet. There are a lot of different people who are taking different interpretations on what the application of Title IX will be to this new paradigm. And it is, I think, one of the more important open questions that is still lingering as we develop the approach around this new paradigm. But what I think is most important is we need to try and develop some unified approach. If we're looking to create competitiveness, Title IX historically is something that's been managed on a campus-by-campus basis, and it's not something that's been regulated by the Big Ten or by the NCAA. And so in this environment, we're trying to create an expectation that we've never had before, which is can we legislate a unified approach to Title IX, which has always been something that's been the mandate of the federal government, not a national organization or a conference.
Smith Center was actually a large investment in football. Have there been smaller scale things that had maybe not as impactful, but kind of under the radar were impactful for the program?
We've made tremendous investment in football in the last 5 to 8 years. Certainly the Smith Center is one that is probably the most visible, but we've invested in staffing dramatically. We've invested in nutrition, we've invested in equipment, we've made investments in scheduling in the way that we've approached that as well. We've made investments in Memorial Stadium and our fan experience. We provided access to our coaches on recruiting to be able to move around the country more freely than maybe they had previously. And so there's been a lot of investment into our football program that isn't as visible as the Smith Center, but I think has been every bit as impactful in terms of their day-to-day work.
There's some logistical challenges that come with the integration of several West Coast programs coming into the Big Ten, but specifically for Olympic or non-revenue sports, just how do you kind of plan to tackle those types of logistics for travel?
One person's opinion, I think that the logistics around the Olympic sports has been a little bit misstated. If you look back at most Olympic sports at schools like Illinois, they're doing a lot of extensive travel in their non-conference. Our approach is we're going to replace some of that non-conference travel with what will now be conference-based travel. And so you've seen our track team traveling to California, you've seen our swimming team traveling to Florida, you've seen baseball chasing the good weather down south. And so you're still going to see our teams traveling the way that they have, except now some of those trips will be done in a conference setting as opposed to a non-conference setting. And so we don't anticipate on the aggregate, on the whole, that it will be a meaningful difference for our student athletes.
If you are seeking a universal approach to Title IX as it applies to revenue sharing, does the university leadership have a particular preference on whether it should apply or not?
It would be premature for me to comment on that. We're evaluating everything that's happening around the landscape right now. We're gathering information from our own legal counsel. We're gathering information from across the conference, across the country. Again, the idea is to try and do something centralized so that everybody approaches this in a consistent manner. In order for that to happen, we have to get a sense of what's happening around us, and we're continuing to gather that information.
As the T1 Council Chair, are you sensing that there's camaraderie among the conferences? Like, are you getting good integration with all you guys?
I think so. Yeah, I think that certainly amongst the four autonomy conferences, that there is, I think, a lot of collaboration that's happening, especially at the commissioner's level. There's ample discussion amongst those four individuals. There's a lot of back and forth between the athletic directors when we run into each other at different events or communicate. And so I think there is certainly a lot of discussion happening. And as Tony mentioned when he was at the podium, I think there's ample compromise occurring. Different things are important to different conferences, and there's a willingness on the part of leadership to listen, to allow their colleagues to speak and be heard, and to provide, I think, opportunity for compromise as they get into those discussions.
Getting back to performance, just on the field, with an expanded playoff, there are more, certainly fan bases, but I assume more ADs, more coaches who are going to view success in terms of are you in or didn't you get there? Is that how you view college football ultimately as an AD?
Every program is going to have a different and, I would say, evolving definition of success. It depends on where you're at in your program's trajectory. It depends on what your tradition has been, what your history has been, what your current circumstance is. And so I think that's going to vary widely depending on what is happening on each individual campus. Certainly the expanded playoff gives more fan bases, more programs that opportunity on any given year to have that chance. I think what Tony said at the podium was really spot on, which is this idea of creating meaningful games deep into the regular season. I think that is going to be one of the net benefits of this expanded playoff that's largely going untalked about. Isn't so much the playoff experience, but what's it going to mean to the regular season now, instead of just having maybe 6 fan bases who are jockeying for those 4 spots. You may have, for 12 spots, you may have 20, 25 fan bases that when the calendar turns to November, you're still playing meaningful games that give you the chance to compete for those slots. And so that, I think, will add a layer of excitement and drama to the regular season that will benefit the sport of college football as a whole.
What did your gut tell you? Where's Illinois on those fronts?
I think Illinois very much is in the mix. I think with the expanded playoff, think about 2 years ago, we start the season 7-1. We're in the college football playoff rankings. We weren't able to finish the way that we wanted to, but if we had, we would have been right in that conversation. And so I think for a program like ours, aspiring to be in that 12-team field is very much within our reach, and something that we talk about on a regular basis.
This isn't too broad, but in 3 years with Brett, are there a thing or two that you've noticed in terms of his process or his approach that's elevated, maybe where the floor is, and maybe can put you closer to that spot?
The first thing I think about when I think about Brett Bielema is his work ethic. I've never been around another person who works the way that he does. And because of that, he's able to get into the detail of every facet of his program in a way that I think is incredibly helpful. He's more involved from a hands-on perspective in recruiting than any head coach I've ever seen. I mean, he's able to build relationships with recruits, with their families, from the head coaching chair that I think is incredibly beneficial for our program. He's a teacher of the game. He's able to really command the room with our players. He's at one point, at the same time, he's a players coach. He listens to them. He understands the challenges they're going through, but yet at the same time, he's able to hold them individually accountable. And those are 2 really hard things to do concurrently. And for him to be able to do that and navigate in that space, I think is a credit to him. And so he's a true CEO of our football program. And I think that's what has started to separate what can be really hard for first-time head coaches, is grasping the complexity and the breadth of college football today, having a full-time staff of grown-ups with families and their own issues going on. 50 people is very different than where we were 20 years ago. And I think a lot of coaches come through the pipeline. They're very adept at coaching 18 to 22-year-olds. That's their comfort zone. They take that next step into the head coaching chair. All of a sudden, you're responsible for a bunch of adults with families and pressures and all the things that are going on in their lives. It can be a lot for any person, and I think he manages that incredibly well.
Josh, where are we with the state's NIL law and maybe making a lot more impact to where your neighboring states are?
We have an amendment that's pending the governor's signature, passed through both sides of the state legislature this spring. And so we're waiting on the governor to sign that. We anticipate that happening here in the next month or so. And so we've continued to try and stay abreast of some changes there and seek amendment where we think it could be helpful.
Two more.
Or none.